Hey there, Morbid Maniacs. It's time for another sort of spooky video, a part of Vlogtober. And for tonight's video, I'm going to be talking about the history of Halloween. Now, I found this very intriguing because ever since I can remember, Halloween has been my favorite holiday. I've always loved it. I just wanted to learn more about the history of Halloween. The video may be kind of long, so I apologize in advance. And also I wanted to say that I made this video for educational and history purposes only. It was not meant to offend or harm anyone in any way. Also, I apologize if you hear those dogs in the background. My neighbor's dogs bark at everything, so yeah. So Halloween origins date back to the ancient Celtic festival known as Samhain. And fun fact, that is the original name for Halloween. The Celts who lived over 2,000 years ago in an area which is now known as the United Kingdom, Ireland, and the northern part of France celebrated this festival on November the 1st. So November 1st would mark the day that was the end of the summer and the harvest, and was the start of a very dark, cold winter. They usually associated winter with human death because everything dies out, everything's dead, it's cold. Celts believed that the night right before New Year, that the line between the living and the dead world was blurred. On the night of October 31st, they celebrated Samhain, and they believed the ghost of the dead returned to Earth. They believed this time was good for the Druids and the Celtic priests to make predictions about the future. Because of humans not really knowing what's going to happen, they depended a lot on these predictions, and it brought them a lot of comfort in the wintertime. Druids would build huge bonfires where they would burn crops and animals as a sacrifice to the Celtic deities. During the celebration, the Celts would often wear costumes. These costumes consisted of animal heads and skins, and they usually told each other's fortunes. When the celebration was over, after they had put out the bonfire, during the telling of their fortunes, they would relight it to protect them from the cold winter ahead. By 43 AD, the Roman Empire had conquered the majority of the Celtic territory, and the festivals of the Roman origin and also the Celtic, known as Samhain, were combined. The first one was a day called Veralia, a day in late October when the Romans would commemorate the passing of the dead. The second was a day to honor Pomona, the Roman goddess of the fruit and trees. The symbol of Pomona is the apple. With the Samhain tradition, this is probably where bobbing for apples came from. On May 13th, 60 AD, Pope Boniface IV dedicated the word I cannot pronounce in Rome in honor of all of the Christian martyrs, and the Catholic feast of All Martyrs' Day was established. Pope Gregory later expanded this to honor all saints as well as martyrs, and he changed the date from May 13th to November 1st. By the 9th century, the influence of Christianity had made its way into the Celtic lands. In 1000 AD, the church would make November 2nd All Saints' Day, a day to honor the dead. All Souls' Day was celebrated just like Samhain, where they would have huge bonfires, parades, and they would dress up in costumes of saints, angels, and devils. The All Saints' Day was called the All Hallows' Day, or All Hallowmas, and the night before was the original tradition of the Samhain in the Celtic religion. But then it began to be called All Hallows' Eve and eventually Halloween. At the time, before it expanded in the US, it was very, very limited in the parts of colonial New England because of the belief systems there. And it was more well known and celebrated in places such as Maryland. The first celebrations included play parties, where they would hold events to celebrate the harvest. Neighbors would share stories of the dead, tell each other's fortunes, and dance and sing. They also included ghost stories and stories of mischief making of all kinds. By the 19th century, fall celebrations were common in the US. However, Halloween was not yet celebrated. In the second half of the 19th century, America had a lot of new immigrants come in, and they had actually helped popularize the celebration of Halloween. Americans began to dress up in costumes and go from house to house begging for food and money, which has now become our tradition of trick-or-treating. Plus, I don't know if you guys ever remembered, back in the day, I would always hear that if you did certain little tricks with the water and the moon, or there were certain things you could do to tell your fortune and to tell who your future lover was going to be. Well, back in the day, young women believed that on Halloween they could find the name or the appearance of their future husband by doing certain tricks. They would do these tricks with yarn, apple parings, and mirrors. In the late 1800s, Halloween parties became more common for adults and children. The parties included games, foods of the season, and costumes. Parents were encouraged by all the newspapers to take anything that was frightening or grotesque out of the Halloween tradition. Because of this reason, Halloween lost most of its superstitious and religious overtones in the 20th century. By the 1920s and the 1930s, Halloween became a more secular holiday with more parades and parties. And it was around this time that what we refer to as egging and TPing started showing up more, and a lot more of the vandalism was taking place. The locals were trying to warn everyone and try to stop this from happening. By the 1950s, the town had got this vandalism problem pretty much taken care of and under control, but because of this reason, because of this vandalism that was taking place, a lot of the Halloween traditions were more directed at the younger children. Between 1920 and 1950, trick-or-treating had made its way back into the Halloween tradition. It was believed that families could prevent tricks from being played on them if they gave children a small treat. The American tradition of trick-or-treating also goes back to the early All Souls' Day parades in England. So during the festivities, poor citizens would go around from house to house begging for food and money. And in turn for this, families would give them these pastries, which they called soul cakes, and in return for promise that they would pray for the family's dead relatives. Soul cakes replaced the tradition of leaving food and wine for roaming spirits. The practice, which was referred to as going a-souling, was replaced by children who would walk around their neighborhood going door to door. On Halloween, it was believed that ghosts would return from the dead and come back to the earthly world. People thought that they would encounter ghosts if they left their home. So here's a very interesting fun fact about Halloween masks and where they could have maybe originated from. So we already know about the Celtics, where they dressed up and they wore costumes such as animal skulls and skins. We know where most of the costume ideas came from, but what about the masks? To avoid being recognized by these ghosts, people would wear masks whenever they left their home after dark, and this was just in case they ran into these ghosts. This would confuse them into thinking that they were one of them. On Halloween, people also left bowls of food sitting outside of their homes, and this was to prevent ghosts from coming around and entering. So jack-o'-lanterns actually started out as turnips, and people also used beets and potatoes and rutabagas. They actually did not have pumpkins in Ireland, and that was the reason why they started out with a turnip. They would place a hot burning ember inside of the turnip, and this was to ward away evil spirits. So when these immigrants came to America, they discovered pumpkins and realized that pumpkins were a lot bigger, and so they started using these as what we now call our jack-o'-lanterns. It also goes back hundreds of years ago to a story called Stingy Jack, or Stingy Jack. I think it's Stingy Jack. So I'm going to read this story. Now there's different versions of this story, but I'm going to read what I found. It says, Stingy Jack was a miserable old drunk who took pleasure in playing tricks on just about everyone. His family, his friends, his mother, and even the devil himself. One day, he tricked the devil into climbing up an apple tree. After the devil climbed up the tree, Stingy Jack hurriedly placed crosses around the trunk of the tree. Unable to touch a cross, the devil was stuck in the tree. Stingy Jack made the devil promise him not to take his soul when he died. Once the devil promised not to take his soul, Stingy Jack removed the crosses and the devil climbed down out of the apple tree. Many years later, Jack died. He went to the pearly gates of heaven and was told by St. Peter that he was mean and cruel and had led a miserable, worthless life on earth. Stingy Jack was not allowed to enter heaven. He then went down to hell and the devil. The devil kept his promise and would not allow him to enter hell. Now Jack was scared. He had nowhere to go but to wander about forever in the dark nether world between heaven and hell. He asked the devil how he could leave, as there was no light. The devil tossed him an ember from the flames of hell to help Stingy Jack light his way. Jack had a turnip with him. It was one of his favorite foods, and he always carried one with him. Jack hollowed out the turnip and placed the ember the devil had given him inside the turnip. From that day onward, Stingy Jack roamed the earth without a resting place, lighting his way as he went with his jack-o'-lantern. That was all of the origins and the history that I could really find on Halloween. I hope it wasn't too confusing. I did my best to do research. I've never did a video this in detail, this far back into history before, so I hope it wasn't too confusing for you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I myself personally found it quite interesting and intriguing because, like I said, Halloween's always been one of my favorite holidays, and it was pretty cool to find out how it originally started. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a big old thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you have not already and become a morbid maniac. And be sure to leave me a comment and let me know what you think. If there's anything that I missed or left out of this video, feel free to let me know. And I will see you guys in my next video. And they helped to popularize would commemorate I can't speak. Celts believed that on the night